welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I have Jeb Taylor on here with Jeb Taylor Knives. And welcome back, everybody, to Minnesota Well Done. I have you on to the show for a couple different reasons. I think that you are you do good work, right? You also seem to be a fan of the show, and I kind of like to. The point of the show is not to have people who are all over the place, all over social media, just constantly hitting the pavement with advertisement. It's kind of to shine light on people that aren't as out there already. And I mean, especially if you're doing quality stuff, that's kind of the thing that I want to have on.
Possible, yeah. I think, I'm not out there too much. I don't think I'm physically attractive enough to be like instantly likable. So I'm like 40 years old, so I missed out on being cool in any shape or way or form.
Yeah.
The ship sailed, but I like to make knives, so.
Yeah. Well, that's what that's why you're on the show, because you like to make knives. You know what I mean? Not because you're good looking.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that you're ugly by any means, but
I could be like a Northern Tools model, maybe.
Yeah,
like
but you could come in with an eye on your chin, and if you make good knives, it doesn't matter to me.
That's true.
Yeah. So I want to get into first a little bit how you started making knives and where that came from and how that's kind of progressed in your life.
I like knives since I was a little kid. My mom got me a pocket knife, probably younger than maybe you should have.
Yeah.
And cut myself the normal amount of times. And I was in the Army. I joined the Army and I was right out of high school. I was gone. And I always liked them. And I used to travel a lot for work. And I was working over in the Philippines off and on for a lot of years. And I'm in the middle of a jungle, and there's like a guy with like a piece of metal, just like structural steel, and he's making bolos. They're utilitarian. They're like for the workers. Like they're not pretty, and he's grinding them with like an angle grinder.
Yeah.
And he's running it all off a generator. And I always thought it was cool. We bought a bunch of them, and like they weren't horrible. They would use spring steel out of cars, which is not a bad choice really. But I just thought he was totally rad.
Yeah.
And I'm an American. I could do anything I want.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I could do that. And so I tried, and I was horrible at it. I'm still not a good forger of blades.
Yeah.
But that was enough to be like, I'm going to try this again. So then this was, 2000. I missed out on the internet in the classroom, so I was like maybe a little bit later adopter of the internet.
Yeah.
So it was like, I don't think I had a smartphone until maybe 2005.
Okay.
And YouTube's coming out. There's a lot of videos, like you can do this. And I started doing that, and I was like, I was using the wrong kind of steel, but I was just grinding stuff on like this Harbor Freight. Like they make like these tools that are very low budge tools, but like
I've been.
Yeah,
I've been.
I got this Harbor Freight grinder, and I just want to make them, and I'm making them, and they're horrible. And I'd show them to people. I'd look at them, they'd all be nice, and I lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I was there most of my career. I didn't really move a lot. And there's the North Carolina Custom Knife Makers Guild is there. And North Carolina, I would argue, is the spiritual center of knife making in America right now.
Okay.
There's more high-end makers and masters, and they're all the whatever organization you kind of lean towards, whatever, they're all there in this one state.
Yeah, kind of based there and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had a guild meeting, and I went to like one meeting, but I would travel for work. I'd be gone for like 6 to 9 months all the time. So I'd go to like a meeting, and then I'd go like a year later. Nobody would remember me because I was all quiet. And there's this one, I went to this meeting, and the president there was from Fayetteville, and I knew who he was. And he's like, if you're new, and I don't know you, so you're new, stand up and tell you. And I'm Jeb, I'm from Rayford, North Carolina. And their big thing was linking up new people. They were all about education. So linking up new people with experienced people.
I love that.
And there's this one guy named Darren, and this is the biggest mistake here. I knew who he was. I internet stalked him. Like I knew all about him. But I'd like pretend like, oh, you live near me?
Yeah. Like, oh yeah. Or what's up, Daryl? Daryl?
Yeah. And I said, oh, Chris, Darren, you get with Jeb. Like at the end of the meeting, link up with him. And he lived 10 minutes. I didn't know exactly where he lived. I wasn't that much of a stalker.
Yeah.
But he lived 10 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
And then I just showed up at his door. He's like, yeah, come on over. And I think he just said it to a lot of people. And that was like the worst mistake he ever made. And I was there all the time. And I was making these just crap-ass knives. And he's he had a very illustrious military career, and then he's a very well-known knife maker too. But I just kept showing up, and I think I recognize that if you're asking someone for their knowledge, you need to pay your own way. I think that's what helped me becoming a knife maker is I would bring all my own materials, and anything that cost money, I would bring on my own. I would not expect anything from them.
Yeah.
Or from him.
Yeah.
Like, I've got my metal. Like, I wasn't just showing up there like, here, help me. I was like, I've got this. I do enough research that I wasn't, because you're taking their time.
Yeah.
But I wasn't at least losing them money to take their time.
Right.
It was at least neutral.
Yeah.
And I would do stupid things for him. I'd just, like, sweep. I drill holes. I just, like, and I just do whatever I could just to be in his atmosphere.
Yeah. No, in the restaurant community, we have something very similar. It's called staging, right? So like you go and you work for free, and then you learn from whoever that you're cooking under, and they get the free labor, and you get the free education. And it's in this country, it's more, you get paid a small amount for when you start. But it used to be, and I've done it at a couple places, where you work for free for a long period of time, and then you learn, skills that you wouldn't learn in other places. You kind of, you do the same thing where you stock a chef, you see the food that they like, you see the restaurant that they've created, the environment that they've created, and you go, how do I do that? And they're like, well, come on board and do it yourself. So I'm very much in tune with that kind of mentorship way of living. So go on.
Yeah, well, so I was there, and this is like maybe 2012-ish in there somewhere, and I'd just be gone again. So I was working in Afghanistan for a while, and then I switched over to I was working out of Eastern Europe down to Turkey and the Syrian border. And wherever I'd go, I had a lot of control over my own scheduling where I worked at, and I would always find knife makers wherever I'd be at.
That's a perfect place to learn, huh?
It was like I was going down to Georgia, like former Soviet Republic. I'm finding Georgian knife makers. I had to go up to England for some conference. I'm like, it's gonna like a 4-day conference. I'm like, I think it's gonna be a 5-day conference, guys. I found this guy up in England. I'm out there driving across the countryside, and I would just. Yeah, I would just take I wouldn't take advantage, but I used the opportunity to be. And then I was in Germany, is where I was based out of. So I go up to Solingen, which is like the mecca of kitchen cutlery, and I just kept doing it there. And I'd harass some European makers a lot. I'd go polish screws for one guy who makes famous knives in Europe. I'd polish screws for him. I'd just hang out with him, and his apprentice was Russian ethnically. And spoke less English than I did. He was. We just smoked cigarettes, and I'd polish screws for him one at a time. And I just always. That's what I would do with my free time. I'd mess around with knives.
Yeah.
Everybody had different things, but that was what I would whenever I could. And then I was gonna retire, and they had a pretty good program. I ended up getting medically retired, and it was this the Special Operations Command Care Coalition. And so I was getting medically retired. I was already at my 20 years-ish, but you could tell them what you wanted to be, and like these guys had resource and connections, and it wasn't like, here's the opportunities. Like, you could tell them I want to be a dolphin trainer. They probably would have had you down in SeaWorld.
Right, they got you a spot ready.
Yes, they knew how to do it.
Cool.
But there was a knife maker and a knife grinder company in North Carolina where I was casually friends with the guy at that time, but I was like, hey, I've got this thing where I can like come work for a year for free.
Yeah.
Would you be interested? And he was like, yeah, it'd be great. He already knew me, and I was already a maker enough where I wasn't starting from zero.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 pieces of paper, and I had to go tell my boss at work, I want to do this thing where I just don't come to work, but I still count against you.
Yeah.
And where I worked at the time, everybody was getting out. Like it was
Exodus.
It was a schoolhouse for a doctrine. Like every guy there like was on their way out the door. So they weren't like protectionist. Like I need you for the fight. Like there's no fight. We're writing books here.
Yeah.
And so they were like, that's awesome. Yeah, sign away. Like have fun. So I went and made knives for a year, and I had a key to the place. And I just started off cutting handles. Like I would do sheets of this for a guy named Chris Williams of Wilmot Knives, who's my friend and mentor. But that's how he started me off. Like the least expensive thing I could mess up.
Yeah.
'Cause, the sheets
Makes
of
sense.
yeah. I just cut out giant sheets of stuff.
And now what is that made out of?
This is just called G10. It's a laminate. It's essentially just this epoxy and like fabric.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's really good because it doesn't rot.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty thermally stable. Like it doesn't absorb moisture.
Yeah. Rarely cracks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's tough. It ain't. Yeah. You'll hurt yourself before you crack this.
Yeah.
So I just cut out sheets, and then I got to like drill holes, and that was his apprenticeship for me. Was I started okay, you get to drill holes, and he's very detail oriented. Like he's good to work for, but he's a pain.
Yeah.
Because he's that like working in machining is it's getting the structure of measuring in thousandths.
Yeah.
That really the rest of nowhere else in the universe doesn't even talk about these numbers.
Yeah.
And being able to visualize thousandths of an inch. And that's the big shift, I think, in manufacturing is when you visualize, oh, this is so many thousandths. And you're talking about, like, made-up numbers.
Yeah.
But that was his eye, was you have to do this good. Like, I think it looks great. And he's like, this looks amateur. And, like, I'd be all sad,
Yeah.
But it was very good. He was a great mentor. He wasn't inspirational. He was like, hey, you suck. Do this better.
Yeah.
You learned a lot. Darren was more like he was inspiring. I'd bring my crappy knife, and he'd be like, you tried your hardest.
Yeah.
Here's what you should do next time. And he'd frame it differently. Chris is more like, this is horrible. Here's how you could fix it if you wanted to stop being horrible.
Yeah.
They're both great mentors.
Yeah. I've had very much of the same thing, and I think it's important to have both things in your career, in your learning process, right?
Yeah.
Keep yourself hopeful, but also realize that you're a piece of shit and you make shit. Yeah.
It was very good. It was good for me, and I think worked in the Army. Like when I first came in, I was never in when they could beat you or anything. I never got beaten in the Army.
Yeah.
I think hazing was pretty rampant when I first came in, but but there was no feelings there. Like they would just say I used to like answer to the worst things now that I'd be like, call me that. I used to answer to these things like, yeah, you're talking to me.
Yeah.
So I didn't really mind having a tough mentor.
Yeah.
Then I just kind of got better, and then you have some guys who make really artsy knives. They'll sit there and they'll polish and they make works of art. And that was not for me. Like I just don't have it in me to stare at the same 2 inches of material for days.
Yeah. I'll go on a little bit of an aside here quick. That is part of the reason that I kind of wanted you on the show, is because I could see that it was very utilitarian for many of the knives that you were making, and you make knives for all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
And not just chef knives. And I think that chefs, right, sometimes get carried away with the embossed Damascus, in quotes, style steel, where you have the multi-layered kind of deal, and it is very beautiful. But I think that the beauty of a sharp knife is kind of unparalleled in terms of like the artsiness of it. You know what I mean? Like when I cut, like I got a blue steel. I'm gonna forget the name of the maker, but anyways, it's like when I can just kind of drop the knife and it cuts right through a raw Brussels sprout. It's like it's a little bit. That's the beauty for me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So go on. I'm sorry. So go on. I mean, I love what you do. So you don't you're not focused on the artsy stuff, but you make good work, man.
I want it to be aesthetically pleasing, but anytime someone's polishing, like you're paying for their time.
Yeah.
And you've got like there's my friend was over at his house, and he'll make you make these chef's knives that are beautiful. They're like $3,000.
Yeah. And
honestly, they're not really going out to many working people.
Yeah.
They're going to somebody's house.
Yeah.
That's his market, because it's going to get dropped. It's disgusting. It gets treated with solvent all day long.
Yeah.
It's getting cleaned. Kitchens are gross. I worked at Brenda's Home Cooking in Bayfield, Colorado. I started off as it was a diner. She was from Texas, and it was a matriarchy. I was like the only boy there.
Yeah.
And it was her and all her daughters. And like it was I just had to do everything gross. I started as a dishwasher, and then I'd just be like a line cook. And it was a cool experience, and I just always appreciated it. And I don't think ever being a chef was for me, but I just appreciated the 3 years I spent there in the high school. And She made rad food. It might not have been technically it was awesome. Like nobody's gonna say no to like an awesome chicken fried steak.
Oh yeah, no.
And it's that experience. I got to really see how horrible kitchenware gets treated.
Yeah.
A lot of kitchenware. It depends where you work at. You know, like if you have to invest in your own tools, you're in a different caliber place.
Yep.
Like I don't think you're at like I could be wrong. I don't feel like at Applebee's or something. If you're working there, you're probably bringing your own tools. I could be wrong. Maybe they do, but I see a lot of those like the white NSF injection molded handles.
Totally.
And that's the same with like butcher knives, and that's kind of where I've decided to focus on with butcher knives. They're designed for a slaughterhouse. I rehandle a lot of butcher knives for old butchers, and they'll come back and they're just these wires.
Yeah.
And one guy, he worked at the Dubuque packing plant making hams for 20 years. Like that was it. And I got these from his family, and there's these 3 like wires of knives, a little handle on them, and I put them. There's no handle on them, but they're just like, dude, these are our dad's. And I figured out what knife they were, and like they were a third of what they started out with.
Oh yeah.
And he just sharpened each one because a knife has, especially for butchers, like it has a lifespan. Like it's a pyramid.
Yeah.
You can only take the top of the pyramid off so many times, and it's a rhombus. You know, like it has a definitive for those who are so sharp so many times a day. So there's not a lot of butcher knives out there that are made for sort of like a higher grade. You have Victorinox out of Switzerland, and then I think Victory out of New Zealand.
Yeah.
But they're making for their market. They're all NSF safe. They're all injection molded. I mean, I think the one thing that separates kind of when you look at knives is even from like Wurstoff or Henkel is they don't know who their consumer is. Yeah. Really, like I mean, they're making this knife set? Is it going to go to Is it going to be somebody's wedding gift and the person doesn't care? Yeah. They don't know. So a lot of times they'll make them a lot softer. There's a scale of hardness, and it's only for hard things. So it's not like Jello to diamonds. Right. It's like metal to metal. Right. It's the Rockwell scale, and a lot of just kind of mass-produced over-the-counter knives are around 55 on the hardness scale. What that does is it makes it less prone to chipping. Okay. Because they'd rather have you sharpen it than break it. Yeah. And so if you make them higher, like in the 61 to 63 range, a lot of Japanese knives are like 61 to 63. Oh, they just make them hard. That's how they do. They're not as easy. Like, it takes a more skilled sharpener to sharpen that knife, and it'll break. Like you drop it, you're gonna be sad. Yep. Whereas that Henkel might bounce. Like you might get that one bounce out of it. You're like, all right, it survived. Yeah. But that's where they're at in their price point. And like I said, they don't know who their consumers are. And even Henkel makes different lines. Like, you're not finding the Bed Bath & Beyond one at every store, but they've got things, the Twin Star. Like they make their ones where they make them harder. They know it. I mean, they made a knife since 1841. I mean, like they know exactly what they're doing. Right. They'll try to make it a little bit harder. Got to work with a couple butchers. I don't think a lot of my knives go out. I make mine thicker than this one. These ones you'll see is it's 3/32 of an inch. Some of them get it even smaller, down to like 1/16 of an inch.
And that adds to the flexibility when it has nothing to do with the actual metal that you use. It's more, well, maybe it has some to do with that, but it's more about how thick the back of the blade is. Yeah,
you look like a fillet knife for fish, which has to be like the most flexible. Mm-hmm. And those are a 1/16 of an inch usually. Yeah. Whereas, so that's what, 1/16 of an inch, and then 1/8 of an inch is 4/16 of an inch, or 4/32. But that's like the steel is sold in 1/16 of an inch increments from the manufacturer. That's how they sell it up to a certain point. So it's like you're just buying that sheet. Like, they're not making you your dimension every time. Like it's just that. That's why they come these standardized, because it's the metal manufacturer. Okay. And then Japanese ones are in metric, but I'm sure at this point they're like, if you can machine one, you can do the other. It's not just math. Right. Right. So I'm trying to make them harder. I'm trying to make them like they're nicer. Like,
well, I have a question. What kind of what is the actual steel that you use for your knives? Because for some of my viewers, they know their metals, they know what's going on, but some do not. Right.
So this is a chef knife I've made. So this is just a blank. It got This one got water jetted in Michigan.
Okay.
It's called AEBL. It's a stainless steel. This is also exactly what you'll find in high-end razors, like Gillette Schick quality razors.
Okay.
That's what it was designed for, was a stainless steel for razors.
Okay.
Works very good for cutlery. I would say this is the maybe of the acceptable steel world, right? Not of what I would use. I'd say this is like maybe the bottom third.
Yeah.
Like it's acceptable. It's good. It's not as cool. There's these metals, when they make the metal out of a powder, it's called a CPM steel, a crucible powdered metallurgy, where they make, before they even pack it, it's already powderized. That's the finest steel in the world.
Yeah. I had one Miyabi, I think, that was powdered steel.
And it's like the metal price is like probably 40% more.
Yeah.
But it is perfection. Like there's no way around it.
Yeah.
But this is probably bottom third of the acceptable band. For a stainless steel chef's knife, when you buy a knife, if it says stainless steel, odds are it's a very lower end. Because if you're getting higher end, they're going to tell you exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Because they're just passing that price on to you.
Yeah.
If you see a knife that says genuine stainless steel, that is going to be a lower end steel.
Yeah, definitely.
If it has like some number codes and everything, then you start creeping up. I just ordered a bunch of, it's from Sandvik. It's called 14N28, just number codes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's from Sweden, and I just ordered the biggest order I ever made. It's 14 by 72 sheets.
Yeah.
So for a little guy, that's a ton of metal for me.
Yeah.
And that's a good, I'd say maybe upper third stainless steel cutlery choice.
Yeah.
In the boning knives I was making before, I'm switching over to stainless steel. These are 01. It's high carbon steel. It's a tool steel. Knives are such a small percentage. Like the tooling industry is the guys who know how to cut the best are paper cutters, like paper cutting mills.
Oh, I see.
Like that's like the worst thing. You're cutting newspapers. Like the things they use for that, they're not easy to work with. But like things that cut newspaper, like industrially, are like the strongest. They love these like S7, these crazy other metals and stuff. And nobody, they're not easy to work. They're not easy to heat treat. 01 is a high carbon steel, and it's very easy to heat treat.
Okay.
You take like 1450, let it sit for 10 minutes, then quench it. Then temper it twice for 350, and it's pretty much good to go.
Yeah.
These stainless steel is a process. You'll take it up to like 1400, let it sit for 10 minutes. Take it to 1930 degrees, let it sit for 20 minutes. Take it out, quench it in between aluminum plates. Then take it up to like 400 degrees for an hour. Let it air cool. Put it in liquid nitrogen for 8 hours. Let it air, and it's just
wow.
The process just gets longer.
Yeah.
It's pretty legit. If you see anything that's cryogenically treated on a stainless steel, it's pretty legit process.
Yeah.
Like, it does make them harder.
Yeah.
And I would just describe them as maybe toothier, which is not a technical phrase at all, but just my interpretation.
Yeah, toothier in terms of like what the final teeth on the blade, you mean?
Yeah, like those exposed carbides.
Yeah.
This thing like on a like 01 is a high carbon steel. It has a lot more carbide. Like 99% of 01 is iron.
Yeah.
The percent of carbon. Like stainless steel is like 85%. It's got vanadium, chromium, molybdenum. It's got a lot of other in it.
Yeah.
And those
molybdenum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those might be good for certain things, but they're not good for the actual cutting carbides.
Yeah. Okay.
They keep it from rusting. They make it more malleable, but they don't actually make any of it toothier.
Yeah.
That's why high carbon knives will never go out of style, because they work good. And the stainless steel knives they're easy to own.
Yeah.
I have some crappy Henkels in my house because my family doesn't deserve good knives.
Yeah.
It is going in that dishwasher.
Yeah.
No matter what, it knows what's going to happen every time. Like, oh, you're dirty. Guess where you're going.
Oh, that's blasphemy, man.
They held up though.
Yeah.
But we don't deserve nice knives.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break, and then I want to go a little bit more in depth into the actual like tempering process and what goes on during that, because I think that is and knife care. Let's talk about knife care a little bit, because I have very similar experiences with family members. So, all right, man.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. I hope you guys are enjoying my tutorial education entertainment conversation session with Jeb Taylor, because he's a super cool dude. And he made me this boning knife, which is beautiful. It's got a carbon steel finish. to help help no rust, and it's. I think he said it was like 63 on the hardness scale. So you get to see kind of like a finished version of what he's doing. Very cool. I really appreciate it. And I want to take this, minute or so to just remind you guys that the Patreon is up and there are things happening on it. So I have special tasting session of Frenchie's chocolate, Adam Hertz chocolate, and I have an audio-only episode of about staging with Darren, and there is more on the way. I'm going to have a sweepstakes coming where you can get some of the products that you see on the show, and there's lots of good stuff happening on the Patreon. It's at www.patreon.com/Minnesota Well Done. Thank you guys. Back to the show. All right, we're back. All right, so I want to talk about the tempering process just a little bit, because for people who aren't aware, the tempering process is really how you create metal that is harder than you got it when it was the regular just ore. And so basically you expand, the carbons are set up in like, let's just say little cubes, right?
Yeah,
little segments.
Yeah, crystals.
And as you heat it, right, it causes them to expand, right?
Yeah.
And then as they expand, it's, mostly oxygen or nitrogen that gets trapped, basically air particles that get trapped inside, right?
Yeah. The process is when it's super hot. Every steel has a super hot point where it needs to be.
Okay.
For carbon steel, it's around 1500 degrees.
Yeah.
And so down on the molecular level, you got austenite to martensite. And it's a conversion of one crystalline form to the other.
Okay.
And it's entire people's jobs to really understand that. But at the end is it's at this high temperature, and as soon as you quench it, and it has that 800 degree temperature shift in a sub-second.
Yeah.
It forms the austenite or the martensite to convert to austenite.
Okay.
Or the other way around. I'm sure someone out there knows exactly.
Yeah.
I probably messed it up and they think I'm an idiot, but I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
So this temperature shift, and that is what locks in this crystalline structure.
Yeah.
But it's very brittle.
Yeah.
So because it just had this huge temperature shock, and so during the transition of the tempering process, it takes the brittleness out of it, and you can hear it in a knife. Like I can tell because I'll flick it. And if it hasn't been tempered, it sounds differently. It's a completely different sound. It doesn't vibrate the same way. And the tempering process is usually low temperature. It's like 350 to 450 bandwidth. So it's not the same, like blazing hot process that was to harden it.
Yeah.
But that is what keeps it from because it's so brittle. Like if you don't temper it, it would break.
Yeah.
You would drop it, it would break, and it causes the full conversion and then of the austenite, I think, the tight. It causes the full conversion of the metal over, because they're on a half-life. There's never like it's all changed over. It's a process.
Yeah.
And then cryogenically treating it, taking it down to like negative 305, that will convert even more.
Yeah.
And mostly stainless steels need that.
Okay.
To reach their full effectiveness. They're still very effective, but to reach their full effectiveness, that liquid nitrogen really does work.
Yeah.
And then you'll temper it again at the same temperature. I do most of them for 2 times. These ones I treat at my house. The stainless ones I send over to Pennsylvania. There's a company there that just does them for industry. And if you're doing more than 10, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
They come back super clean, and they do it all in a vacuum. Because when you put them on these forges, when they're that hot, they're sucking the carbon out due to the oxidation process of the heat.
Okay, yeah.
And the carbon's what's keeping it hard. So like these, you'll put in like a foil envelope, hoping to keep the oxidation away.
Yeah.
It looks like an X-ray machine at a airport. They put them in, they suck all the air out, then they heat it up, and they come out like clean, and they're just perfect. And they do them all at once, and it's like if you're making one knife, it's not. It's like because it's like a 75. You're buying your space.
Yeah.
So it's like a $75 setup fee. So if you're making one knife at a time, it's horrible. But if you're making like 20, it's like, oh, it's only $4 a knife.
So let's get into the process start to finish for you in terms of the knives that you make, right?
Okay.
So like So what happens first? You get the metal on a sheet.
Yeah, it comes in just big sheets. I get them for these boning knives in '01. This is already precision ground, so it comes from Tyson Krupp, is who makes '01, German conglomerate.
Yeah,
and this is already ground. For between here to here is probably less than 1/1000th of an inch deviation. This chef's knife is not precision ground. This is just rolled. That's the rolled finish.
Okay.
So if we were to really measure it, there might be a lot more deviation.
Yeah.
So before I put a handle on here, I have to grind this. This one, it's already ground. It's already flat.
Yeah.
So I get this. I send it to Michigan.
Yeah.
So I don't see it at this point. I just get it drop shipped in Michigan. They come. They nest this pattern. This isn't a. It has big radiuses, so it's not an efficient knife to make out of metal. Like, its design doesn't lend itself to getting maximum out of knives.
Yeah.
Maybe if it didn't have this part right here, it could, when they're cutting it, they're just nesting it together.
Yeah.
But this makes it less efficient. But I like guards. Then it gets cut. Then it comes to me. I then grind the back. I go and I grind down the sides, and then I make it round across the back of the spine. That's where your hand's going to land, and I think it just feels way better.
Yeah.
As opposed to... And you'll see that on a lot of custom knives, is that rounding of the spine is really a kind of a go-to indicator of where you're at. Then I'll round right here, so where your hand's touching it, I break the radius, because... Especially butchers. I mean, if you ever talk to someone who's a butcher, just look at their hands.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're just stones, like stone hands. It's cold and slimy, and it requires a huge grip all day long. That is being a butcher. So at least if your hand is touching it, it shouldn't hurt you, no matter what.
Yeah.
Then I'll heat treat these. I plate quench them, so I use aluminum plates that are 1 inch thick.
Yeah.
And I'll take it out, and I'll put it in one, and I put the other one, and I clamp it down, and the aluminum has, I think, like one of the highest... Here's some fancy words, thermal coefficients of any metal, and it sucks the heat right out. It's the equivalent of dipping it in oil to quench it.
Okay.
It works just as good, but it's clean. It doesn't smell bad.
Yeah.
Just blowing it, scale comes off, and this will probably come at that point. This is about 62 to 63 Rockwell hardness.
Okay.
For a boning knife, that's a little hard.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, a boning knife is impact. Like, it's gonna hit something.
Yeah.
Like, it's not It's not like a nice vegetable slicer where you have like a fun relationship. Like, this is designed to bounce off a bone. So I take these down to 56 to 58, and it's a bandwidth you're aiming for. Like, honestly, you're looking at like a 1 to 2 point bandwidth up or down, and that's based off the temperature you temper it at. Okay. So 300, if you do like a 300 degree temper, it would probably be like maybe 59 to 61. 350 would be like the 56 to 58 bandwidth. And so it's like baking a cake. It's not a lot of art. It's more science. Yeah. And then I get it, and then I take, this is G10. It's a laminate. It's a fabric and some sort of composite juice, epoxy. Yeah. And I take this, and then I think I have a knife. I'll form fit it on top of there, and it will look like this at a certain point. Yeah. You look at like all old chef's knives. If you look at like any knife made before, I don't know, probably the 70s. Yeah. Anywhere in the world, they are linear, because they would make them on these giant wheels. Like, that's all they had. Like, I can cut this radius. I can have a computer. A radius is the hardest thing to machine in the universe. Yeah. So if you're using like a 7-foot spinning wheel, everything's gonna be straight. Look at all German cutlery. It's all straight. All butcher knives, they're straight. Like, you might get a little something for the finger. You don't get a lot. Yeah. Because how do you make that? Right. And they made them on these giant wheels. But I live in modern times, so I can make. This is designed. When I design it, I know that there's a wheel going to fit right in here. Yeah. Specifically, so that I can make it. Right here, I use a 1/2-inch wheel to clean up right here. Yeah. And I've got the wheel loaded, and it's a 2x72-inch belt, and it fits that spot right there exactly without hitting the blade, because that would not be good. Yeah. But it cleans it up right there, and then I'll use a big wheel, and it's just horizontally mounted, and I'll just go and I'll whip it around, and then I'll use smaller wheels to get in here, and that makes it all flush like this, so it's just flush. Yeah. And beautiful. Then there's kind of two ways you can do it. This one I'll use that 1-inch wheel mounted horizontally, and I will just chamfer around it and hand polish it. This is called Rich Light. They make cutting boards and countertops out of it.
Yeah.
And it shines like a marble. Like it looks really good. It's like never gonna go spoil. I mean, it's not gonna go bad. It's pretty darn. I mean, unless you soaked in. I don't know. I've never seen one soaked in water for months. But if you did, I think it would maybe be all right.
Yeah.
So this one is gonna be all more polished. These ones, this G10, I will then use. It's a router bit, just to put a 1/4 inch radius on the edge, and then I'll hand sand it with like. Use a belt, I mean like 300 grit, and then I'll sandblast it. And then I make a lot of them that are oxide coated. I think I'm probably going to go away from that more. But if you look at any knife finish, the closer you get to polish, it costs more money, and I don't think working knives last very long that are polished.
Okay, yeah.
I think if you've made it that polished, that means something can unpolish it really easy.
Right.
And maybe it's like a presentation knife, it's like a gift or something, but day in, day out, actual cutlery use, the probably more than 400 grit finish. Like polishing, you're going to be like 2,000 grit sandpaper to get there. Most knives you're going to be at 400 grit.
Yeah.
Finish.
Okay.
Or else it's going to start polishing.
Yeah.
And then the thing about polishing is, if you have any flaw, it just shows it more.
Yeah.
The lower the grit, the better. Is for look at most pocket knives. They'll have a stone finish. It's a manufacturing decision. If you want to pay somebody to sit there and chase every scratch for hours, sandblast it and throw it in a big giant tumbler with rocks for a half a day.
Yeah.
And it comes out great. It's a very good. It's a smart finish. Like you won't be on a. I mean, one knife is very polished for me. I did like 800 grit, and I don't know if it was steel wool. It was an abrasive scrubber the person had. They did this number right here, and it just scratched all right down. And they're like, I just got this. I'm like, I'm sorry. It is what it is. Like, it is now scratched. And
there's nothing I can do about it, man. So I'm curious as to like what the final sharpening process is before you send it out. Like, what grit do you sharpen it to? Do you use a whetstone? Because like when I sharpen my knives, right, I start with a 400 and then I move up to like I go 400. 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200 to sharpen my blades like when I'm resharpening. Is it a similar process? Do you use a wheel or
chef's knives? I do that on chef's knives.
Okay.
On boning knives, I do a 100. I use aluminum oxide, and it's I use a lower grade aluminum oxide belt. Work better.
Okay.
I do 120 grit, and then that's where I establish the secondary bevel.
Okay.
And I'll go not screaming fast, and I'll have the belt right here, and it's mounted here, and I do 3 times this way. So I go on this knife. If you can imagine this, I'll hold it here. I'll go 1, and then I'll do this portion right here, right there.
Yeah.
2, 3. Then I do the other side. 1. Do that little portion there. 2, 3.
Okay.
Then I do it again one more time at 120 grit. 1 time across, then 1 time across. Then I switch over to 400 grit.
Okay.
So the 120 really established it. The 400 is to polish it because it's not removing anything at that point.
Okay.
And
it's kind of like, I think of it like at this point you're kind of fitting the teeth back together, right? When you're talking about those carbides, right, that are sticking out like this, instead of having them stick like this, you're kind of like moving them in here like that, right?
They call it the wire edge.
Okay.
And at that very edge, as the 2 planes meet, you'll see it, and you see it on a belt grinder instantly fast. On a stone, you just never really get to see it as much. You see it instantaneously. Because I grind mine, chef's knives, I take to about 12 thousandths of an inch across, which is right here. So this part right here, 12,000. A piece of paper is 3 thousandths of an inch.
Okay.
So 4 pieces of paper thick.
Yeah.
Is the width I'll grind these to.
Okay.
And it'll come together. As you start to sharpen, it'll bend due to the stone because it gets so weak.
Yeah.
And then it forms this wire edge, and if you don't stop, you'll think the knife's not sharp. Right underneath this flexible edge is where the sharp knife is hiding.
Yeah.
And then that's where, so I use Spyderco ceramic, the Spyderco Tri-Sharp. It's 2 ceramic rods.
Yeah.
And they just stick out there about a foot long. I like them a lot because you can't hurt the knife. I mean, you could, but like, it's easy. You don't have to worry about hurting the knife. It's just 2 ceramic rods, and then I said this is like a sequence I go through. Then I strop them.
What is that?
A strop is just the leather. If you think about barbers, she barbers with the razor blade going back and forth. That is a strop, and because they're barbers are like there to cut hair. Like it's super. It has to be that super. Like there's no strength involved. It's all just cutting. That's where that wire edge that's formed just from the metal collapsing from the sharpening process. When you put it on that leather strop and you push into it and you drag it, it breaks that wire edge off. And that moment in time right there is where all those exposed carbide teeth are. That's where they were hiding.
Oh,
and
I see.
That is the sharpest moment in time that knife can be.
I love that.
And I see most people. I see like the sharpening steels are not for everybody.
Yeah.
They are not, and I think maybe it's a conspiracy is why they give them to you, because like they know that 99% of people are going to destroy that poor knife.
Yeah.
Because they're like trying to sharpen it. All it does is getting the teeth in the same direction at that point. If you watch people use them, like, oh my gosh, like.
Oh, I've had. I mean, in restaurants that I've worked at where I've had people working under me, it's kind of one of those things where I have to go, okay, you put your stuff down, and we're going to have a little bit of a lesson about how things are working. So, and here's kind of how I look at it, and here's the thing. I mean, people are just taught wrong a lot of the time. Yeah. They don't really understand what's going on. They're just doing as they saw. But I mean, so in my opinion, from what you're saying and from what I understand, I move it like this across the rod because all I'm trying to do is push those back into place.
Yes.
Right? That's what you're doing when you're honing.
Yeah.
You're not doing it blade first.
No.
That's when you're going to take those and you're going to bend them down like this and you're going to make your blade like that, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The best sharpening tool you could ever have for anyone is a Sharpie. Just take a Sharpie, put it on the very edge, and then see how what your sharpening's doing to that edge.
Yeah.
Like you might be missing it. Like you might think, especially on stones, you might think you're doing good. That Sharpie doesn't lie. Like it's going to show you exactly where metal's getting removed.
Oh wow!
And it's totally
I didn't
free.
think about that.
Just Sharpie and then go through your process. I mean, you're essentially
fascinating.
You're essentially just taking the pyramid and you're establishing a new point of the pyramid.
Yeah.
As far as you can, but just put Sharpie on there and that will show you what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. It's going to show you where the metal, because it's kind of easy to hit like right here. Like you're hitting down.
Yeah.
Like, and depending on your angle and that. There's a guy I know named Bill. He's like the whitest kid you ever met, and he's a sushi chef, and he could sharpen knives. And like he tells some great stories about being like this kid in Texas who sharpened, a sushi kid, and he could sharpen knives that were ridiculous.
Yeah.
And because he's like that, yell at me and be like, he has great stories behind it. And but I would give him some of my knives to sharpen. I thought they were gonna be like fancy knives, and he had to like learn to do it like, and I wouldn't even attempt to articulate how well he would know how to sharpen a knife because it's like. He is very gifted at that.
Yeah.
I put a working edge on them. 400 grit works pretty good for meat.
Yeah.
You have to adjust to what you're going to cut on,
Yeah.
So.
I love to hear that. Now, I'm really glad that we talked about the honing process. And let me check what we're on time. Yeah, we got plenty of time. So. Can we go into the difference in bevels across the world? Because what I grew up with, right? When I started to learn was kind of I guess I don't even know what you'd call it, but it's like a double bevel like this. And then as Japanese knives got more and more popular, there is a 0-point edge. That I've heard of, and I don't have a knife with it, but I've known people with Hitoris and the like. And can you explain to me the difference between the two?
Yeah. So you look at just a normal knife. So it's you have a full flat grind. So from the cutting edge up to the spine, you're gonna make 2 V's, right? a lot of Japanese knives, so they have, people also call it as a chisel grind. So one side is cut perfectly flat, and then the other side, only one side, and they're always handed. That's where you start hearing about handed knives. Like
Yeah.
it's for a right hand or a left hand knife. The other side is ground, and it's ground down to about 0. So it's just like the mathematical edge of two places. Like I aim to make a rhombus, 12,000th on the top, and then I sharpen up through the a little bit of the rhombus.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's rhombus. Yeah, absolutely one of the numbers. What they're doing is perfectly flat, and then it's a chisel, just like a wood chisel.
Mm.
Look at those. You look at fish cutters, and cut under their construct of cutting fish is always done singularly on the pole. They're gonna cut and they're gonna pull. That's why they're so long, because if you're cutting and you're not making it through, you need to know that you've got 4 more inches of knife to get you all the way through.
Yeah.
Because on the push, it moves. First off, if you're making like beautiful presentation, like you only get one chance to cut it. Like, you can never line it up twice and make it cut the same line.
Yeah, you're gonna mangle it.
Yeah, so it's all on the pull, and that's why they're so long, because it's all one, and it's a pull, and they'll be hand based, and it's the chisel grind. European, France and Germany dominate the cutlery for design. Like, it is what it is. Like that's just Solingen in Germany is really like where most knives in Europe kind of were conceptualized out of. They use just the double. It's a V. It's a straight up V. There's another one. It's a convex grind, and this is what I attempt to do. So to this line here, and I'm getting ready to do it. So up into here, it is a V. I'm just gonna grind this pure flat. It's gonna be a V.
Okay.
Then I'm gonna radius, so it will come straight V, but up at this point, about an inch into the air, then it'll curve.
Okay.
I think it feels better. I think it looks nicer, and it pushes. There's nothing but opinions when it comes to like what you like for cutting.
Yeah.
And the only one that matters is you.
Yeah.
But there's 1,000 different ones. Some like the full flat grind. Some like the convex. There's one called an S grind now, where they will essentially make this flat right here, and then they'll hollow it out. They'll run. It's the equivalent of like a 72-inch wheel.
Okay.
And then they'll hollow out right above this line, so that there's dead space. So things
I've seen those
fall off, and it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
And the guys who can do it, like it ain't easy. I've never made one that anyone got to see.
And what is the theoretical positive to that?
You have dead space. It's mostly for vegetables.
Okay.
So that like it can't stick up to it.
Oh,
because there's nothing there. When it hollows back in, it'll just fall away.
I love that.
And the guys who can do it, there's not a lot of them do it well. Like you could try it, but and they use usually it's the platen that they're grinding on is a radius of like what would be a 72-inch wheel.
Yeah.
Or whatever number they've deemed. You can get different sizes, but it's of a giant wheel radius, and then they'll run that right here, and then that way there's this negative space, and
then it doesn't like suck to it
exactly
like a vacuum. Yeah.
I made a stonewash finish knife the other day, and it was awesome for meat, but on vegetables, it just grabbed hold of everything. I found out.
Yeah.
One of my buddies had it, and he's like, you try and cut a vegetable on there, and it just that stonewash finish does not lend itself, and that's where you need the polish. Like it's trial and error.
Yeah.
But the stonewash finish, I saw a lot of guys doing them. I'm like, I'm gonna try it because it is a lot easier to throw something in a tumbler.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good for meat. Like meat is fine.
Yeah.
And cooked meat, a knife for cooked meat is a joke. Like I mean, like you could, I don't know, you use the whatever, like a credit card. It's gonna cut. You know, if it's done right, it's gonna cut.
Yep.
But that stonewash finish is just not good on vegetables, and I probably won't make another one. I was like, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I could see. You're cutting off a lot of possibilities with the finish if it's sticking like that.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's the problem with chef knives. I mean I have many different knives for many different purposes, but that's one of the things with vegetable knives, right? Is like you kind of want your main knife to be able to do things that are kind of intense, but also delicate. Right, so like you do a petit julienne, and you want and you move that to like a petit dice, you want all your vegetable juliennes, right? The little rods to kind of like stack together so that you can just turn it and go right down again, right? And if it's sticking to the knife, then I mean you're taking, if you were to add up the time that it takes to push it off, and then kind of go through it again, and then your cut isn't good because they're not, it's not this little box, especially when you do things like carrots or celery. It's just, it's a world of difference when it doesn't stick. I think that's super fascinating. Let's quick take another break, and then we'll come back and we're going to do a special segment called What's on the Shelf, and we're going to talk about what you have on the shelf, and then we'll call it a day.
Sounds good.
Awesome. What's on the shelf, man? What's on the shelf, man? Yeah, just we were off screen for a second. You were talking about you're the president of the Midwest Knife Makers Guild. Okay. Any info that you have for that, give that to me, and I'll pop that on the episode, because I'm sure there's lots of people who were. Because here's the thing with chefs, right? We want we want quality stuff. Right, we want it done well, and some people are kind of like into the froofy style, and they get taken kind of taken in by that polished ideal. Yeah. But there's lots of chefs out there who we just don't know where to go. Right, we don't know where to go to get the quality stuff. We've done our research, or some research, right, and I think that would be kind of the place that we'd want to go to look for knives for us.
I think it would be the. I say it wasn't hard to be president. Like, I'm not skilled. Like I say that. Like I just happen to be the guy. If you're not at a meeting, you could get nominated to be president of any volunteer group.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm not trying to fill your head with hot air. I'm just saying it's one of those things where I'm big on networking, and that would be a networking thing for people who watch the show for sure.
I think it would be good. It's a good group. I will do that. I like it. There's some there's a guy who moved here from Ohio who makes ridiculous knives.
Yeah.
Nobody would know about him, but he makes probably some of the best knives I've ever seen. Yeah. He was mentored by a very famous guy, and he lives right here. Like, he lives over in he's like 20 minutes from here.
Oh yeah.
Nobody knows who he is. He's so quiet and unassuming, but like, he's legitimately like, if I had to pick, I want somebody's knife, I'd take one of his.
Well, see, that's what I'm on the hunt for, because for one, I want him to, be able to sustain whatever he's doing by selling his knives. But I also want, my friends and my coworkers and the people in my circle to have the best quality stuff that they can get. Where usually we have to call somebody in another. Usually that's what ends up happening is we call somebody, who has a connection to usually Japan lately, and we can get, a knife like that, for instance. But let's talk about your shelf a little bit. What did you bring in today?
I got 3 books brought in. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. I read this book in the 9th grade, and I just thought it was great. It's not very long. It's a quick read. You could read it in like one sitting. It's about a guy who was in the Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and it's one day, and I enjoy detail. I think that's why I like knives. I like to fly fish. Like, I enjoy detail-oriented things.
Yeah.
And it's one day. It's like starting off, and it's just the monotony of what it was like one day to be in a Russian prison.
Yeah.
And the author wrote other books, and then he became kind of Ronald Reagan met him at the airport when he left Russia and he came to the United States.
Oh, that's very cool.
This was written in like the early 60s, but he came in like, I think, 81 to the United States, and Reagan met him at the airport because he was like one of the first people to document what like what the gulag was, how they just disappear people and just, let you they would just let you die without having to shoot you that day, and just the process. And he escaped it. He made it out, and it's fascinating. So I love that book. I just read it one day. I'm like, this is awesome. My family's all from North and Eastern Europe, so those are all my relatives over there somewhere probably.
Well, has that changed kind of like your course of life at all, do you think? Because, I mean, I've definitely had books that seem to be even minorly innocuous, and then I look and I'm like, oh, I've kind of like shaped. Like, I had a book called A Wrinkle in Time, right? Yeah. And it's basically a sci-fi fantasy book for kids. But then, like, as I became an adult, I was like, oh, I kind of like formed my belief systems around this, you know?
Maybe, I have relatives who just don't exist because of World War II.
Yeah.
They're in Poland. And some of the family members would try and find them. It was never when I was a kid, I wasn't privy to this, and all of this whole generation just disappearing on us. But the idea that, like, one of my aunts, like, tried so hard to find family members in Poland after the war, and they're gone.
Wow.
Like, they're just not there. Like,
Yeah.
she tried, she went, she sent the letters, refugee groups, never ever found them. Like, there's this whole group of people out there that, like, in my lifetime, I should be able to see if I wanted.
Yeah.
They ain't there.
Yeah.
Like, they're gone, man. And I think that, and I just kind of viewing, like, the life of my grandparents, and, like, I think my grandparents probably be second generation, so their parents would have been coming over. It's a split mix, but they're all immigrants pretty recently, and just like why they were sad and like why some were so happy, and I think America is so awesome and wonderful, and we have our problems, but day in day out it is awesome here, and I think for those people who lived in World War II have to just like why that generation is just so happy because it just had to be miserable.
Oh, yeah.
And fearful, and like, where is food coming from? Like, I think with the pandemic, like, for the first time, people were like, what if I can't get food? Like, I know it's at the grocery store, but that's about it. And if it ain't there, then what am I going to go eat tree bark?
Yeah.
And I think it's the first time seeing, like, the grocery store strain was the first time for a lot of people to be like, where does our food come from?
Yeah.
And if I couldn't have it, and like, just how important, like, at the end of the day, food is the most important thing on,
It's interesting that you bring that up because, like, that is something that I've been on the side of, like, we need to get people closer to the process of making their food, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially with fast food or fast casual, whatever you want to call it, right? It's just they've kept putting more and more steps between the beginning of their food, right, and then the actual creation of their food. And as a chef, right, there has definitely been a movement more towards that, right? Like, let's get farm to table, right? Let's get people out to the farm so they can see, right? Yeah. Like, this is actually what you're eating, right? I did a thing at a farm this year, and we made sure to get the cows in the back, and we made sure to get because it's like, people were eating food right next to where their food was being, generated from, right? The genesis of their food. And it's just crazy because for years I've kind of been on that kick, right? And it's more than a kick, but I've been living that lifestyle, and I've been trying to not preach it, but educate people in it. And then the pandemic hits, and like now people listen. You understand what I mean? Like, a restaurant is no longer a place that you go to see fancy food. A restaurant is somewhere that you go where they know where the food comes from. They know how to prepare the food, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think that it's very interesting that you brought that up because it's such a key part of life. And I think it's really interesting. Okay, so what else do you have?
I brought the machinery handbook. After I got out of the Army, I became a machinist. At school. This book has all the answers. If you're into metalworking, it's in here, and it is probably the equivalent of putting man on the moon mental effort. What goes into this book, and all these guys are gone, and they did it all by hand. But this is like from how gears are cut to how like this metal. There's so many answers in this book, and it's hard to understand this book, is how complex it is. And but it's just this is not my copy. You can tell when somebody became a machinist by what version they have, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes get older ones be like,
I love that.
Yeah, like, oh, I got a 15th edition. Like, you're only 40 years old, so I didn't know that you're like. You weren't born in 1960, but you can kind of tell. Like, someone will be like, "This is my," and like the old guys will do it because obviously they can flex more than I.
Yeah.
It's like I got my first copy is the 29th edition. Okay. And I think they're getting ready for 32 right now, so I'm like 3 editions back. But in 70 years, then I got the 39th. You see all the old guys flex. Like I got this one.
I got the 14.
Exactly. It's definitely like the machinist flex. And then I love this book. I use it all the time.
I like that concept because when you were talking about like numbers that don't exist, right? So I'm going to school to be like a soil microbiologist.
Yeah.
And so when you're dealing with microbiology, there's so many different, like, you can't even really call them species. We do call them species, but there's so many different, like, small, like, genetic differences from one species of bacteria to another. And they have these huge volumes of books in which, it's like, if you want to tell if this is, let's see, let's just say lactobacillus to make it, if it's lactobacillus instead of lactobacillum, right? It's got to have a purple hue on this specific agar. So you have these huge charts of like all these different species, and I find it very similar, right, in the way that that information was collected, because especially in microbiology, right, all that stuff was kind of the information was collected by hand painstakingly over years and years and years and years. And now, like, when you go into a microbiology lab, they have these hoods, and they have like these, they have like the super high-tech, high-intensity microscopes that go onto a computer, right? But it's like those guys were sitting with a microscope,
and a notepad.
Right? Yeah, and a notepad. It's just like, it's so insane, but it also makes you really appreciate what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, to see, I don't know, to just see the collection of knowledge in something like that. So I think it's very cool.
Yeah. I brought the Bible. I'm Christian. I think it's a good book. I think the world will be a lot better place. I don't come up to Minneapolis. I live in Rochester, so I call it the Florida of Minnesota. I drove up here the other day. I saw there's riots, and I think on all sides, you're supposed to love your neighbor. Like that's the basis for Christianity. Yeah, definitely. No matter what side you're on, like if you just be more loving to your neighbor, I think the world will be a better place. I think that's what people forget. I'm probably very libertarian personally. But I think it's so hard. People just like I said, I'm surrounded by cornfields, so like nothing affected me personally. Like, I'm at the end of a road. Yeah. But I see people, and just on all sides, just so much hatred and everything, and just like, especially for Christians, like you got to remember, like Jesus told you got to love your neighbor. So I think you should read the Bible. Anyway, that's a book for me.
Yeah. What version of the Bible is it?
That's King James version. None of that New International. No. I just like the King James version.
No, I always so I was raised. My mother was Roman Catholic. And German Catholic, but they're very, very similar versions of Catholicism. And then my father was kind of Greek Orthodox, right? And I grew up, the Minneapolis, St. Paul area is like just like incredibly diverse. So I grew up around all these different religions, but I got to know different versions of the same story of the Bible, right? Oh yeah. And I just find it, I would agree. I'm not, I wouldn't call myself like a practicing Christian necessarily, but I've definitely read the Bible, right? I've read it cover to cover, and I've read, like I said, a couple different versions, and I would agree with you. I think it's definitely something that people should read and should live their life by. Now, I think it's interesting that you brought up the riots, because it's just been such a defining moment for people in the cities, right? And it's something that I've gotten to see people, again, how you said people on both sides, they kind of like this insanity has taken over them of this self-thinking, right? I don't want to just call it selfishness, right? Because I don't think that it's that. I think it's just like they're not able to see the other side they're not able to love their neighbor like themselves kind of thing.
I think they lack empathy, where you don't have to agree, but like, can you at least see their perspective? Like, could you say, like, you have a perspective, I might disagree, but I can see where you're coming from. And I think when you can't even do that, like, I don't even know how you negotiate past that. Yeah. And I think a lot of people become very insular towards the cause. I had a lot of friends who were cops, and I was in the Army, and if you're it ain't easy. It ain't easy to be like, you go like, I don't know, you go to war or something. That ain't easy. You know, like, and like, it changes people. I see a lot of things. I feel bad that cops get put in situations because they're really the end of the line for the entire justice system. Yeah, like, you got like 17,000 things led to this one moment in time, and then you're this guy who has to deal with it. And like, I didn't write the law, but like, I think our society. I think it's not easy for anyone. My heart goes out to anyone who's hurting. I grew up on the side of a mountain in Colorado, so like, it was a pretty undiverse universe out there. Yeah. But I think anyone who's hurting, like, my heart goes out to that concept that like, we're all people, and every conflict I ever worked in, I got to work in a few of them. It was about resource. That's why they're fighting wars. Like they try and church it up with a bunch of like, oh, this, that. It was resources what they wanted. People very few, argue over. Like they'll align with their group.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to why they're fighting, it was a resource.
I love that you say that. Okay, because I am just we're gonna go off on this riff because this is what I'm all about, right? So I'm becoming a soil biologist, right? Specifically the mycorrhizae and the bacteria that work in the soil to stop desertification, right, or reverse desertification in some instances. And I just had this argument with my dad yesterday, but he's a little bit on the side of, he's very, very right. I'm also his son, so it's like harder to have any kind of like conversation.
You can never be 100% right.
Yeah, no just shut the hell up, But no, so it's like you look back in history, and there's all, you can look for a million different reasons why the Hellenic Empire kind of fell apart, or the Roman Empire fell apart, but a lot of it goes back to the soil, right? They were plowing and they were killing the microbiology of their soil. Their soil desertified, and now you have an entire empire and various nations throughout history because they lost their resources, right? And I think it's awesome to talk about because people don't really realize that. Right? Sometimes it's a lack of education, but sometimes there is just all this different propaganda and all these different sides kind of vying for control over a situation that has been sparked by lack of resources, right? Because that's what a lot of people that I've talked to have said goes on in the Middle East. It's like there's so much desertification and there's so little arable land that it's just a pool. It's a pool of gasoline waiting for any kind of match because everybody's they're hungry. They don't have you can't build an economy if you don't have like an agricultural system to back off of it.
Yeah, I think it's just it's just sad. I used to work all over that neck of the woods, and I remember going to like the Taliban. This is Jeb Taylor here, but what the Taliban brought to Afghanistan was jurisprudence. They brought the law.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't make schools. They didn't build roads. They didn't build dams and infrastructure. They brought the law.
Yeah.
And the society there, and like the society there is hard. Like when I used to go there, I used to always think like, for some reason, poppies grow in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Like for this one magical thing, for some reason they like it there.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the world's like, you can't grow poppies. And they're like, I'm living on Mars right now. I'm in a giant valley of dirt, but for some reason this one plant will grow.
Yeah.
And you want to take that from me, man? And it's just it was never a rational logic train. Like, we're gonna tell them to stop growing poppies, and it's like, they ain't got anything else to grow. Like, there's no food here.
Yeah.
Like the Balkans, like just the collapse. I think anywhere you'll see the resource fight. I'm way off the reservation here, but that's my take is just the
well,
resource.
you're not off the reservation because here's my point, and this is why it's like I've kind of like I haven't fully left the restaurant industry, obviously, but I mean the reason that I'm so galvanized towards this direction is because it's like that used to be the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so like it's the mismanagement of agricultural practices over a span of 1,000 years, but sometimes it can be a span over 100 years, and you can see empires fall because of it, and then you get the entirety of the Middle East and the Balkans and even parts of the Mediterranean where they have completely unusable soil, and that is going on in America, right? On sometimes a better level, on sometimes a much worse level, right? Where you have the Dust Bowl in the 1930s that has a lot to do with just absolutely no topsoil left. We've deforested half the country, and so a big thing in this show has been restorative agriculture and not pressing any type of like practice, but pressing the knowledge of that and as that as a possibility.
I think the one thing that always shocks me is I got a 5-year-old son who lives off cheese sticks.
Yeah.
And Target. We're here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, the cheese bed of the universe.
Yeah.
We live in prime cheese. This is where cheese is.
Yeah.
And he likes these cheese sticks, and they come from Washington State. Like, you're driving cheese from Washington to the cheese heartland
Yeah.
to sell cheese. There's
Yep.
cheese right there. I'm surrounded by all these cows, and I think all the resource and effort to move this piece of cheese to the cheese heartland, and just like, what a waste.
Yeah.
Like, it ain't good cheese. It's like cheesesteak cheese.
Yeah.
And all this is like the greatest like smoke and mirrors that we're moving cheese to the cheese store, and I just think I don't think it's sustainable. For life. In a long enough time span, I think it's not sustainable because it just doesn't make any logical sense.
Yeah.
If you look at I'm sure in a business sense, there's an opportunity and there's a tax write-off here and there's something here.
Yep.
But if you're just like to ask somebody logically, how does this logically make sense to you that you're bringing cheese to the cheese land?
Yeah, that's kind of that's the problem with all this. There's like a heavy bureaucracy around agriculture, right? Like a lot of the monocropping with corn and with soy has been government subsidized, right? And that's why it is the way it is. It's not that way because people love corn or because people love soy or even that it's the most useful thing, right? Yeah. But people have made it the most useful thing because it's the only thing that they can get subsidized to grow or can get insured to grow. There's all these different programs that really started, with Nixon and Agnew, right? That it was like get big or get out.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's a theme that I constantly try to bring the show back to because, this is my only availability for any kind of platform, right? I'm not a huge show, and I'm not one of those guys who's like, this is my I'm going to, make my stand. I'm not under any illusions there. But when I do, when there's somebody who's willing to talk about it, I think it's good to see all these different perspectives, right? Because the cheese is one example out of, so many, but it's your example, and I think it's just as important as any other. Like, I think Michael Pollan wrote about how apples, they'll get sent off to get waxed in another country, and then they'll get sent back, right? And it's just like the amount of carbon that's being, just like shoved into the atmosphere just on that transportation. But then, you talk about the way that they change the genes of the apple so that it can make that trip. And it's like, why not just, I mean, I think that I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's like, it isn't sustainable, and there are these different systemic things that we can change. And there's also these, scientific biological processes that we can tap into to kind of jumpstart the process of restoration. You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a fascinating episode. You educated me about knives. You educated everybody else about knives. And then this is the first time that I've successfully gotten the shelf segment done. And I think that you had great examples, and it sparked awesome conversation. I'd love to have you on again. And thank you. Jeb Taylor, everybody. Jeb Taylor Knives. Thanks.
My heart, lovers remember my old arms are burning my memory. My shovel writes a new song. I can almost hear them singing along as I keep digging away. Her love rubbed me raw, methamphetamine, alcohol, if only left me stay. Buried in the backyard, long if you're gone tonight. your garage and got myself some dollars and cents. Taking off to St. Paul, and I will surely spend it all on Hope Street, the last house on the block. Phone's ringing, but I'm muted. She probably wants to know what the hell I'm doing, but man, I don't really fucking know. Just sitting here high as hell with some nothing, sickest man I think I have ever met. Since I